Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 234. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. William Shakespeare.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Indie Film Hustle's Filmmaker Process. We provide filmmakers with professional services to get their films or series funded, finished, and distributed. Some of the services we offer are pitch deck creation, film budgets and schedules, domestic and international sales estimates, legal contract templates, consulting, post-production services, script coverage, professional trailer editing, poster design, film deliverables, and production payroll. To learn more, go to www.filmmakerprocess.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Blackbox. Blackbox is a new platform and community that is all about financial freedom for filmmakers like you. If you join Blackbox, you will be transformed from being a worker to being a maker of your own content. And you'll be making steady passive income from the global market. Blackbox currently allows you to upload your stock footage once, get it to many global agencies, and then allows you to share that passive income stream with your collaborators. Whether you want to submit old footage that's been sitting around in your hard drives or create brand new content, Blackbox is for you. It's really quite revolutionary. With Blackbox, filmmakers can concentrate on making great content while Blackbox takes care of all the business BS. Just visit www.blackbox.global to find out more. Well, today, guys, you are in for a treat. I have on the show today legendary film director John Badham. John has made decade-defining features like Saturday Night Fever and 80s blockbusters like War Games, Short Circuit, and Stakeout. And not to mention 90s hits like Bird on a Wire with Mel Gibson, The Hard Way, and Point of No Return, just to name a few. John is also the author of two amazing books on directing called John Badham On Directing and I'll Be in My Trailer, The Creative Wars Between Directors and Actors. And he's also a tenured film professor at Chapman University here in Los Angeles. John is a wealth of knowledge and experience when it comes to directing, and he's been doing it for close to 50 years. I know that sounds like a lot, John. I'm sorry. But it's almost 5 decades of directing and working with actors and telling stories and working at the highest levels of Hollywood. And I was just such a thrill to sit down and pick John's brain in this episode. So if you guys are interested in directing, this episode is just plumb full of knowledge bombs about directing, about storytelling, about working with actors, all sorts of amazing tips. I learned a lot, and I really want to thank John again to take time out of his busy schedule to jump on this episode and talk to the tribe. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with John Badham. I'd like to welcome to the show the legendary John Badham. How you doing, sir? Thank you so much for doing the show.
Oh, this is great fun to be here. I'm glad to talk to you.
You are, you basically were my youth. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s watching your movies, and it is an absolute thrill to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm having fun being here.
All right. So first off, how did you get started in the film business?
I actually was a theater major at Yale, and I was in the Yale Drama School also. Mm-hmm. So I got interested in film and sort of thought foolishly that I could just show up in California and start to get involved in it. You know, I mean, I had a master's degree in directing, mm-hmm. but it was in theater.
Sure.
And of course, when people would say, well, what would you like to do? I say, I want to direct. Oh, great. What have you directed? Well, plays. Plays? Get out of here.
So
plays? What are that?
No matter what decade you were born in, there's always naivete.
That's right. And so I hung in there, kept looking for a job, and finally landed something in the mailroom at Universal, and by then I thought, this is a big deal. I've actually got a job delivering mail.
On the lot, of course. It was huge to be on the lot.
Absolutely. And I walk in the mail room, and there's 12 guys there, 4 of them with master's degrees, including me, and eight with bachelor's degrees. and in the hot California summer sun, right, we're schlepping mail up and down the hill. But the idea was that you would kind of find your way out of there. You would find a department on the lot that wanted to train some people. And it was a busy time at Universal, where they had 24 hours of television plus all of their movies. So the lot was just rocking.
Right.
And opportunities were, popping up right and left. I eventually found a home in the casting office as a trainee casting director, and that's where I started to work with real directors and real producers and who listened to me when I started talking about wanting to direct. So
and you got into television first, right?
So I got into television first because I was working with a great television producer, William Sackheim, who let me start directing small things like literally inserts, close up on the cigar in the ashtray, close up on the telephone being dialed. Right. But to go from there into actually having real people in the shot, and then whole scenes, and finally, when we started a series called The Senator with Hal Holbrook, he and his other producer, David Levinson, said, yes, you can direct number 7 of this series, which was just great. I mean, what an opportunity.
Wow. How many years were you hustling to get to that opportunity?
So I think that's about 6 years, 5 or 6 years before I got to that place. And I thought, oh my God, it's so late. Oh, I'm just going to be ancient. But thank goodness it worked out all right. And then that got me another film, which actually won me an Emmy nomination. Another episode of the same show. And that little stamp of approval, that Emmy nomination, that it kept me busy for years and years.
Yeah, you were doing a lot of what they used to call TV movies or movies of the week.
Yeah, I segued into TV movies, which were just all over the place. There had to be half a dozen every week.
Oh, they were everywhere.
Every network was producing them, and so they were like little movies, and be shot in, say, 15 days. That was like great, 15 days. Because by comparison, the hour shows were being shot in 6 days.
Right.
And these were only like 30 minutes longer.
So you were being spoiled.
So, oh my God, this is great. And you got to do, more interesting stuff and some action things. And people, might take you seriously when you start looking for a movie, as opposed to having just done our television.
Nice. No, so how did you get involved with Saturday Night Fever?
I had gotten to do a movie with Richard Pryor and James Earl Jones and Billy D. Williams about the history of Negro baseball. With the unlikely and unwieldy title of The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings.
Jeez, okay.
But it was a comedy, and was great fun that we shot in ballparks all over Georgia, and it had a lot of music and dancing in it. It was a co-production with Motown and Universal. That actually led to me ginning up with Motown to buy the rights to the Broadway musical The Wiz,
Okay.
and for Universal and for Motown. And so I was working on that with my then partner Rob Cohen, when Universal and Motown decided that for little 12-year-old Dorothy, we should have the noted 12-year-old Diana Ross
Right.
play the part. And I said, guys, I mean, this is a great opportunity. She's a fabulous actress, singer, dancer. I mean, name it. But she's, whatever age she is, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s, probably late 20s. Mm-hmm. And Dorothy, is literally in the L. Frank Baum books is 6 years old.
Right.
Which explains why there's cowardly lions and tin men and straw, mm-hmm. Scarecrows, all kind of the imagination of a child. So wouldn't it be nice if we could find somebody that was really young that could play this? And I'm sure nobody's ever going to have heard of her because we're going to discover her. Mm-hmm. Well, that got into a big thing, and finally we parted ways.
Right.
On that, I said, "Well, you guys understand this because I don't know what to say to her on the stage."
How do you direct a Dorothy who's 30?
Yeah, this scares the bejesus out of me. I mean, you've got a vision that doesn't match. Well, it's happened that the Robert Stigwood organization were producing Grease, mm-hmm. and another musical with the Bee Gees that was going to be called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Mm-hmm.
I've heard of the album.
and you've heard of the album.
Yes.
And they flew me to New York and wanted me to talk with them about doing Sgt. Pepper, mm-hmm. which there was no greater fan of that album than me.
Right.
But the script that they wanted to do, I just didn't get it.
Right.
I was like, what? It just didn't quite gel in my mind, and I, as politely as I could, refused, and said thank you very much, but I don't get it.
Right.
But 2 weeks later, the then director of what was called Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night.
Well, it doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
Not quite. But if we look at the New York Magazine article that it was based on, that was the title. Uh-huh. And nobody had come up with anything better except for calling it Saturday Night. Uh-huh. And that was immediately confused with Saturday Night Live.
Right.
So they said, well, we'll just put a pin in it and deal with this later. So anyway, the director of that film had a disagreement with Robert Stigwood, who was not a human being to ever disagree with, mm-hmm. because he was a tough old Australian, and he wasn't that old either. Mm-hmm. But to me at the time, I think, oh my God, this guy's old. He might be 40 years old. I wish I were 40. Yeah. So suddenly I'm like the next guy to be called on the list. And I read this script, and I had 102 fever from the flu, mm-hmm. in LA at the time. And in the 1 hour that it took me to read the script, I was cured. It was like Jesus came and laid his hand on me and said, "You're cured.
Your fever is gone.
Your fever is gone because you've read this great script."
It broke your fever. That's great.
I'll tell you, it was fabulous. And that was a Monday morning. By Thursday morning, I was standing in New York, starting to interview actors and talked to my new crew and told that I had 2 weeks before we start shooting. This is probably where, having done all those TV movies of the week and everything, paid off, because unlike any normal human being, I didn't fall down and panic and have a heart attack.
Right, because you were used to it.
Yeah, I go, oh, okay, 2 weeks. What's the catch? So
now, as far as the casting of Travolta or of John Travolta, was he was just the guy on Welcome Back, Kotter at that time. He hadn't done Grease yet, right?
That's right, and he had been already signed to do Grease, because from the Welcome Back, Kotter, and from a TV movie called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble.
Yeah, God, I remember that movie too. Yeah.
And if I remember properly, I think he was in the Broadway company of Grease. So he had that experience. So the Stigwood organization signed John to a 3-picture deal.
Got it.
And Grease was to be, the big one to be found, and then somebody came up with this New York Magazine article and said, how about this? That we could do this while we're waiting to start Grease, because they had to wait for Olivia Newton-John.
Right.
Had a very tough concert schedule at the time. And she said, well, I've got available from May to September or something like that. So they said, okay, between January and May, when we get Olivia Newton-John, this is where we'll plug in this little movie called Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night.
It was very much almost like an indie movie. I know that you did have a budget, but the way it was shot, I remember it so vividly, was very kind of in the streets and kind of gritty. And it was not a polished Hollywood movie by any stretch.
No, and it was part of the point, was to make it as gritty as we could. I mean, never having been in Brooklyn in my life, I said, well, what if I were an English documentarian coming here?
Right.
I would just, open my eyes and shoot everything that looks good. And one of the appeals of the magazine article was the kind of gritty realism of this disco and the people that were in it. During the time I was prepping, the very brief time, every night I would go to some different disco. In the middle of the night, there were yuppie discos, there were gay discos, there were lesbian discos. There, any kind of preference you could think of, there was a disco for it. And I quickly realized that this little kind of hole in the wall disco in Brooklyn was very special. It was just, kind of lower middle class kids were coming there, and you didn't really see any adults.
Right.
And it was just the neighborhood. It was the neighborhood disco.
And I remember those guys because I grew up in New York, and I remember that time, and I remember, cousins of mine, that couldn't rub 2 cents together, but when they got their clothes for, Saturday night, they were peacocking all over the place. Oh
yeah, and so it was clear that we didn't want to go and glitz this up.
Right.
That it was not the kind of musical that say Grease was certainly going to be, which was much on a different, much more fun, romantic kind of scale.
Sure.
And that this should have a real grittiness to it. And the script itself, had more profane language and racism and sexism, and really reflected the culture of those neighborhoods, which I would have proven to me every day, because I would be talking to people on the street and extras and learning about the culture as we were going, and finding out that, if anything, our depiction of it was a bit mild.
Wow. Now, how was it? Obviously, when you guys were directing it, I remember we were talking off air about your assistant director, Alan Wertheim, who was a good friend of mine. He told me a story that I think it was you or someone handed him the soundtrack to the movie, and he took it home and he listened to it, and he's like, "This is never going to go anywhere." And his wife was the one that told him, "You're an idiot." and then obviously it became this phenomenon. What was it like being in the center of that storm? I mean, because you had directed literally a phenomenon. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere in the world without hearing that music and seeing those images that you shot. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Yes, I mean the reaction to the soundtrack. Alan's experience wasn't unusual.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me a little tape cassette with the Bee Gees demos on it, which is probably what I gave to Alan.
Right.
And they were rough demos. And I think Paramount had listened to it and said, "Well, this is not even real disco."
Right.
And I think others, were dubious about it, but Robert Stigwood was a real champion, and he said 5 songs on this cassette, 3 of them are number 1 hits,
at least.
Which I thought, wow, that's pretty arrogant. How do you know what's going to be a number 1 hit?
Right.
He was wrong, of course. There were 4 number 1 hits on there. And I don't know what happened to the 5th one, but
it was probably number 2.
It was probably number 2. That's right.
Now, but as a director, we all as directors hope to be involved with a project that gets this kind of attention. What was it like getting the spotlight thrown on you? I'm assuming some opportunities opened up after the movie.
Yes, of course. The Hollywood first reaction was to poo-poo it,
of course,
because they were just totally shocked by all of the negative parts of it, especially the language and the sexism. And I actually got fired from a movie the day after we ran it at the big Hollywood screening.
Mm-hmm.
Picture got put in turnaround.
Wow.
7:30 in the morning. I'm going to New York to the New York opening, and I get a phone call, telling me that the show I was working on is now in turnaround because the head of the studio saw the movie last night and doesn't want anything to do with a director who would, produce that.
Till the box office comes in.
And the box office came, but they never changed their mind.
Okay.
That movie eventually got made, but not with me.
Sure.
So it was crazy. The opening night in Los Angeles, as I was coming back from New York, I drove by the Village Theater in Westwood just to, take a look, see what the marquee looked like. And I see a line at the box office. This is about 10:30 at night that our plane got in. And I drive around the block, and the line keeps going and going and going, goes all the way around the block of this big theater. And this is for the 12 o'clock show.
Wow.
And I walked into the lobby, and all the Paramount execs were standing in there, grown men jumping up and down like little kids.
All they saw was dollar signs, of course. And it, of course, went on to be an extreme huge hit.
It did. The little neighborhood theater near me in Studio City had it in their theater for 6 months.
Wow. Back when you could do that.
You could do that. That was like, we were kind of following Star Wars in a lot of markets, and we're replacing Star Wars because I knew that as I was checking theaters that they'd usually not have a print of of Saturday Night Fever yet, but they would put up a reel of Star Wars, and I'd look at it and check the sound and so on.
Wow.
Um,
Now, let me ask you a question. When you approach, how do you approach directing a scene in general? Like when you're going to go into a scene, what is your thought process? What is your process in general?
Well, there's usually about a dozen questions that I have to ask, which is, what's different what have we learned? What's different at the end of the scene from the beginning? What were the characters in the scene? What did they want? What does one character want, and what does the other character want? Let's say there's two people in the scene. Hopefully they're opposed to each other. They're not just all agreeing. There's some kind of conflict. So I'm always looking for, where's the conflict in here? What's interesting? What in the course of the conflict causes something to change from the beginning to the end of the scene? I ask, whose point of view is this scene? Is it this character or this character? Are we rooting for anybody in particular? And then finally, I'm asking, okay, these guys have goals. A guy wants to take a girl out for coffee, and she doesn't know if she likes this guy or not. So that his goal is to talk her into going for coffee, and her goal is, to kind of politely slide out of it, there can be a fun scene there, and how does he go about it? Is he aggressive like a real macho guy would be, or is he a kind of nerdy guy who's kind of embarrassed, but he's really excited about this girl and he really wants to, take her, so he overcomes his shyness. So as you just start to pull it apart, asking these different questions, you pretty quickly develop a point of view on the scene.
Very cool. Now, what do you do when you're not getting the performance you want out of an actor?
Well, usually I'm trying to help them and go and say, now, what are you playing here? What are you trying to get? What's your goal here? And usually a lot of the problem is that they haven't focused on that. They say, well, when I was a kid, my dad used to, yell at me and it made me wet my bed. And I said, no, I don't want to hear this. I want to know, what are you doing right now? Well, and I've got to focus them on what they're trying to do. And I'm really tough about making them come up with the answer.
Okay.
I can go and it's easy for me to go and tell them now, persuade this girl, charm her into going, I can do that. But the more I can help an actor come up with stuff themselves, the better they're going to be.
That makes perfect sense. Now, do you have any advice for dealing with difficult actors or difficult department heads on a set, which I'm sure you've had to deal with at one point or another in your life?
Absolutely. Every department. A cameraman, let's say, comes up to me and I say, here's the shot I was thinking about doing. And he goes, well, I don't know. I don't like that shot. There's a lot of ways to deal with this, which is, no, this is what we're going to do. And, let's make it work that way. And you can get into a big argument, or the guy goes, oh, okay, all right, fine, which is the last time you'll ever get any, good creative contribution from that cameraman. Or it's just going to be a war between the two of you for the rest of the shoot. I look at the guy and go, oh, that's interesting. Tell me about it. tell me, what do you think? And he says, well, this, that, and the next thing. He said, oh, great. Tell me more. I never thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's the worst idea in the world,
Mm-hmm.
that's why, saying something like, I never thought of it that way is not judgmental. It's just kind of letting him expound on it. In the course of that, and it could work this way with an actor, with a costume designer,
Mm-hmm.
With an editor. In the course of that, I'm learning what point of view that person has on what we're talking about, and I'm hearing them, and I'm also giving them a chance to kind of vent
Mm-hmm.
whatever feelings they have, and I'm not overriding them. And it doesn't mean that I'm letting them push me over either. I'm just listening and doing what some people call active listening, where you're just kind of feeding. Oh, that's interesting. So you think that this shot is into the backlight, and you can't compensate for that. Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was thinking. So what do you think we should do? How would you do it? So with an actor, if an actor says, well, I think I should be over here, and I think you should try this, I go, well, let's try it. My answer to them is usually, yes, let's go, let's try it. Because I know that if I let that person try it, that their sense of professionalism and their creative instincts as an actor, it's going to start to ring alarm bells when it doesn't work, when they try it, when they say, to be over here. Because the scenes have a dramatic logic that it's hard to buck.
Right.
And if you go and you try some weird adaptation to the scene, it'll tell you, no, this doesn't feel right. But the actor, having tried it, first of all, is more willing to try it your way, and say, well, let's do it both ways. Or he'll actually realize that it's that his idea didn't work. Or miracle of miracles, it's a great idea, and only by trying it did you say, oh my God, I would have missed an opportunity here.
Right.
By me. And I've had that happen any number of times, where an actor comes up with an idea, and I go, oh no, inside my head.
Right.
But I try to follow this little method that I just outlined for you, and go, oh my God, oh, that's great. We would have missed something here. Well, thank you, Bill, to the actor. Thank you for that. I mean, there's not a lot you can do, on the other hand, with actors that are showing up drunk or high,
sure,
or just basically
unprofessional,
completely untalented. That you made a mistake in casting, and that's when more radical solutions are called for. Like, can you change the actor? If you can't, how do you disguise them? Hide them behind other people, shoot over their shoulder, too.
Yeah, there's little tricks here.
Lines away from them.
But let me ask you something though, and I've had this happen to me on set, and I'm sure it's happened to you, not recently probably, but when you were first starting out, where actors and department heads as well, but more experienced actors will test you,
yes,
on the first day to see if they're safe with you, and they'll put. And is that true? Absolutely,
of course, yeah.
And how do you deal? And how do you deal with that?
And so it's tricky because, I'm trying to pay attention. I'm trying to be prepared, but I'm also trying to be interested in what they're bringing to it. If I look like I'm paying more attention to the camera and the lenses than their performance, they're going to register that right away, because you get to the end of a scene and call cut, and the camera operator goes, no good. The actor immediately thinks that's about them. that they're no good.
Right.
Whereas actually the camera operator saw a coffee cup on the ground in the background, and it shouldn't have been there.
Right.
So I'm always paying attention to the actor and going over to, I go over to every actor after every take, and just, even if it's just pat them on the shoulder or nod my head or thumbs up or say you're on a good path or give them a little direction. They know I'm paying attention because I'm trying to, build some trust. And building trust with an actor is, as you say, very difficult. I start at 6:30 in the morning going in the makeup trailer saying, good morning to them as they're in the chair, and how are you thinking about today's work, and are there any problems I can help you with? Things like that, just to start building trust before we ever get on the stage.
It's a lot to do with psychology as well on that set. And that's something they don't teach you at film school. They don't teach you the psychology of the film set.
Well, I try to, where I teach at Chapman.
Sure.
And that's a big part of it. And at the risk of plugging my own stuff, my two books are dealing with problematic actors and building trust.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. What are the name of the books? Please plug away.
Okay. Well, John Badham On Directing.
Okay.
It wasn't my idea for that title, but okay. and my first book, which is called I'll Be in My Trailer, which
Great
is
title.
something you often hear from an actor you're having an argument with.
I'll be in my trailer. Call my agent.
Call my age. Yes. That could be the sequel.
Exactly. Well, we'll make sure to put links to those books in the show notes of the show. Now, you've worked with, over the course of your career, the amount of different legends and movie stars and just talent is amazing if you look over the scope of your career. How do you direct a movie star? How do you direct a legend? As a younger director coming up, what do you, or even if you're on the same tier, there's different egos involved, there's different personas involved. How do you direct a Mel Gibson and a Goldie Hawn in Bird on a Wire when both of them were arguably at the peak of their stardom? They were in that area, the peak of their stardom. They were giant movie stars. How do you direct people like that?
Well, I think it's hard because they're intimidating people. They're bringing so much experience to the set, and they deserve respect. They've earned the respect. And I think they become your creative partners. Mm-hmm. To treat them in any other way was a big mistake. We sat with Goldie Hawn and with Mel for quite a while, several times during the preparation of that movie. Listening to their thoughts about the characters and the scenes and what works. And both of them are very, very smart people. Mm-hmm. with good insights. And my partner Rob Cohen and I, spent a lot of time listening carefully to what they had to say and taking advantage of it. It's not the kind of thing where it's a one man show. Like, I can't think of a good example where it's all about the director.
Orson Welles.
But here, as in many star-driven vehicles, you want their chemistry. You want to create a chemistry and foster a chemistry between them. And it's a comedy also. So you're looking for them to come to work in as happy and up a mood as possible, because that's going to reflect in all of your scenes. And if people are not happy, that really reflects. I mean, you can tell it. We as an audience can go, there's no chemistry here. Oh my God.
I've seen movies like that with big movie stars you could just tell had absolutely no chemistry and had no business being on the screen together, or that they hated each other.
They hate each other. Yeah, they hate each other, and you can tell it. It just smells from the screen.
And it smells the opposite way too. When there is that chemistry, when there is that enjoyment, it spills right off the screen.
Of course.
Now, when you've directed some just amazing action films in the course of your career, in your opinion, what makes a good action sequence?
Well, generally.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
There has to be something where you're really involved. The main characters have really strong opposing goals, and something becomes action when normal conversation just doesn't make it anymore. It's gotten to the point where people have to get into a fight. They have to do a chase. Some words don't happen anymore, but they're people pressing their goals. And the trick is now if you're in, let's just say something as simple as a car chase, what are the things that happen during that chase, the different events that happen that start to get more and more exciting and build? It can't just be the stagecoach comes by and then the Indians are chasing it and they come by. Then the stagecoach comes by, then the Indians come by. It's things have to be happening. The Indians have to be trying to stop the stagecoach and jumping onto the lead horses to stop it, and the guy up on top of the stagecoach is trying to shoot the guy who jumped on the horses.
Right.
And so you get through that. Now you got to come up with something that's even bigger, and keep a good action sequence alive with one event after another. So when you look at the great classic scenes, that one I'm describing is from John Ford's Stagecoach. You can jump ahead to Bullet or The French Connection, and see, oh my God, we are so concerned about the jeopardy that Gene Hackman is in, chasing this subway train underneath the L. We're frightened to death because we know how scary that is, and he's almost hitting other people, but we want him to catch up with that subway train that's getting away. And
I heard it's specifically
brilliant sequence.
Oh no, I studied that sequence, and from what I've read and heard, that they were really driving at like 70 miles an hour during that situation. Like it was a real thing. I mean, I know they had stunt people and stuff like that, but it wasn't like they blocked off blocks and blocks and blocks. I heard that they were like just really driving, and it was very scary.
Absolutely right. Yeah, they were Bill Hickman, who was the driver on that. They'd go out at 6 a.m. and just take off, and oh my God, it was terrifying.
And you could get it on screen, and you got it on film. It was amazing, that sequence. Anyone listening, if you have not seen The French Connection, please stop listening to this podcast and go watch The French Connection. Now, what any advice on working with younger or less experienced cast?
It's the same whether it's children or young adults. I mean, with children, the biggest trick is casting it right in the first place.
Right.
I mean, that's easy to say, but if you haven't cast it right in the first place with a child who's got an imagination, who's relaxed, who's not intimidated, and who'll listen to you, you're in terrible trouble. But if you've got a child that has an imagination, you can almost turn them loose.
Right.
I had a conversation with Robert Mulligan, who directed To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how did you deal with these children? And he said, I cast them right in the first place. I just kind of put them in situations and give them a little idea of what was happening in the scene and just let them go. And their imagination took over. So, of course, he spent, Bob Mulligan and Alan Pakula spent over 6 months trying to find those children in the first place.
Right.
You know, they looked and looked and looked all over the country. So that's, you know, part of the thing. It's easy if you can get Mel Gibson to come and be in your movie, or you know, a big star. You know, most of the work is being done for you by that person.
Right. So I forgot who said it, but was it casting is 90% of directing or something along those lines?
Well, I think it was Elia Kazan who said it. And my question always was, yeah, now how do you get that other 10%? Can you get something?
Can you tell us about that thing? Now, I wanted to ask you about one of my favorite movies that you've done, Short Circuit. How did you direct that robot on set? How did that work? I mean, the technical aspects of that must have been, you must have pulled your hair out, because I'm assuming it didn't work all the time.
We had, most movie stars have some kind of a nice trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5 had an 18-wheeler that was all his.
Right.
It was filled with different versions of him, big versions, little versions, versions that went left, versions that went right, puppeteered versions, miniature versions to drop off bridges, and a full-time 24/7 special effects crew that kept him running. I mean, he was our
star,
our Eddie Murphy. He was our comedy guy, the star.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve Guttenberg and Ali Sheedy, God bless their hearts, knew that and knew
they knew where their place was in the movie.
That's okay. You know, we're here to support number 5. And I made everybody treat him like we had Eddie Murphy.
Right.
You know, I'd go on the set in the morning, and when the guys would bring him out, I'd go over and give him a hug and start talking to him, because we always had one puppeteer.
Sure. That
was the voice of number 5, and so he would be talking back, and you know, it's real easy with creatures like that to begin to believe they're real.
Yeah, I'm sure when, you know, if you're talking to Frank Oz on the set of Empire Strikes Back, I'm sure eventually you just start looking at Yoda like it's Yoda.
Yeah, it's Yoda, and you know, thank goodness we didn't have any huge mechanical breakdowns, because the guys worked so hard to make sure he was operating all the time and doing crazy, impossible things, like he looks at a grasshopper in one scene and watches the grasshopper jump. Mm-hmm. And then a full-size 6-foot-tall number 5 starts hopping like a grasshopper.
I saw that, and that was before high-end visual effects.
Oh, like this is all mechanical, visual effects, special effects.
Yeah, it was all practical.
How he flipped a coin like.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Like James Cagney,
right?
Flipping a coin. And that was all stuff we had to do for real, because there was no CGI.
Right. It was all practical.
You could do simple matte shots and very simple things like put in a sunset or something like that. But to do what we do today, no way.
Not even close. And I remember when that came out, that was a monster hit as well. That was another big hit when it came out. I loved it. I love that movie.
Well, thank you. It was. I have number 5, a small version of number 5 in my office. I see him.
That's awesome. Now, one other movie that you did, that I want to talk to you about. How did you approach directing a remake of a movie like La Femme Nikita with the movie Point of No Return? How does a director approach a remake of somebody else's work, and how do you put your own twist on it and be faithful to the original material? I've always wanted to know how you were able to bring it to life.
I so loved La Femme Nikita when I saw it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in a very small theater in Los Angeles, and I know that it's often hard to get people to go and see subtitled movies,
Mm-hmm.
and I walked out of that and I said to my wife, this would make a great American version. It's such an amazing story.
Oh, so good.
And I just don't think, anybody's going to see it because we're seeing it in this nice little theater. But, it was a little multiplex with 14 theaters, and it was in the smallest one of the 14. And I think during off hours, the theater doubled as a phone booth for Superman. My brother observed that he'd seen more people in the 7-Eleven at 3 a.m.
Right.
Than were in this movie theater. So I also said to her, if I'm thinking of this at the point this is in the theater, somebody else has got this idea and somebody owns this, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's already bought this. Sure enough, Warner Brothers had bought it for Luc Besson to direct.
An American version of it.
An American version.
Okay.
And he was going to come over and do an American version of it. And I shrugged my shoulders and went, well, too late. I should have been earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then Luc Besson woke up one day and went, I got other things to do. I've already done this. I don't need to do this again.
Right.
And that's somebody else. So then they came to me, and now our goal is, how can we do an adaptation of it without making something that is more American and fresh and keep the spirit of it. It's kind of difficult, but that's what we went to writers who were character writers, not plot writers.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it's all going to be about her character and how that works for us, because we've got a very strong story here. We don't need more plot. What we need is people, characters that we can identify with. And that was our approach. And it came up with the idea of using for the soundtrack, using Nina Simone
mm-hmm.
as a touchstone for her. That her songs and her kind of female rebellion that Nina Simone sang about was something that would be interesting in helping this character.
So you actually brought it to life because of your love for it.
Right.
No, yeah.
And I lobbied hard, to get that job, because I did really, really love it and loved the character and loved all the characters.
It was such a great story. It was such a unique, fresh story when it came out. It was monumental. But Luc is an amazing director as well.
Absolutely. I mean, his style. I'm a big fan of his, and I'm sure I was vilified in France for having,
How dare you touch this?
How dare I touch it? And I just told the French press, I said, well, please talk to Luc Besson. He's the guy that sold it to us.
Exactly. Luc's the one who sold it.
we just went and very politely asked, can we make a version of this? And he said, sure.
Now, I have a couple questions left. Out of all the films that you have made, do you have a favorite one?
Well, it's hard to say because there's good things and bad things in everything. And I think about the good things and then wince at the bad ones and the mistakes and things I could have
Don't we all?
done better. And sometimes it takes 25 or 30 years before I go, oh no, I just figured out how to do that.
Now, all right. So, you now teach at Chapman University. What is the biggest lesson you try to teach your students?
That it's not about the equipment, it's about the human beings. It's not about the kind of fancy camera moves that it's easy to learn how to do. It's about what is going on with the characters here. What's the story? If you don't get that right, then all the rest matters for nothing. With young directors, the first thing you can learn, the easiest thing to learn, is how the equipment works. Right. And you can get it in your hands and it'll pretty much do what you want it to do. Human beings, on the other hand, are a booger.
They don't do what you want them to do.
Ideas and they have creative thoughts and you have to learn how to deal with that. And that frightens young directors no end. And a lot of our job is trying to teach them how to work with actors and learning how to get the best performance out of them. In addition to how to work with screenwriters and make stories work as well as they can do.
Now, what advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
Is there something else that you'd like to do?
Why, for God's sakes, why?
Why would you want to do this? I have a class of 23 students right now who are all shooting their first short 5-minute films.
Okay.
And they're starting to learn a lot of the difficult parts of filmmaking that have nothing to do with filmmaking. Getting permits, finding actors, budget, all kinds of things that you don't think about when you're thinking about glamorous filmmaking, but they're having to learn. It's a very tough upward struggle, as you know, and that almost has an automatic self-sorting factor to it, where people start dropping by the wayside when they go, I don't have the energy, or I don't care about it enough to do it, or I'm not very good at this. A lot of times we find people thinking they want to direct and then realizing they don't like interfacing with human beings as much, but they love putting the film together, or they love shooting, being a cinematographer.
Right.
So they find other things that they really enjoy doing, and that they're good at, and they can make a career there, because God knows we have enough opportunities now with all of the television networks and channels and cable channels.
Oh, yes.
It's so
insane.
So great compared to, say, television of 20 years ago, when you had 4 networks and that was it. That was the only place you could go. But now, gosh, all over the place. So there is opportunity, which is fabulous. And for those who are making good films in film school, they'll get to break through.
The cream does rise to the top, as they say.
Absolutely. And if you are, nowadays, if you're talented and let's say you're in a minority group or you're a woman, you've got a leg up. It's a great time for them because people are taking them much more seriously, and they're getting many more opportunities.
Right.
I had a talent manager come to one of my classes to talk to them about it. And he looked around the class of 12 people,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, I can tell you who's going to be the big talents in this room right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been in this room for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And he points to the two women.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And he said, I'm not joking. He said that, you guys would, this is great. You're going to get an extra little break here.
That's awesome.
And long overdue too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Oh my gosh.
It's a tough question.
I think I'm still learning it, so I don't know what it is.
Fair enough. And then 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh, okay. No Country for Old Men.
What a great movie. Oh, love that movie.
Citizen Kane.
Uh-huh.
Huh?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, uh-huh. I've heard of it. Yes.
You've heard of it?
I've seen it many times. It's a wonderful film.
And The Godfather, number 1 or number 2, can I lump them together?
You literally, another guest did the exact same thing. I'm like, I'm just going to lump 1 and 2 together because they're the same movie. They're together. They should be. So absolutely. John.
These are movies that have the, I'm only going to watch a scene test,
Mm-hmm.
which is you're flipping through the channels and you come across a scene on Godfather 2, and you say, I'm only going to watch a scene. 3 hours later, you realize you've watched both versions.
Yes. It definitely has that. It definitely passes that test. John, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your knowledge and experience with the Indie Film Hustle tribe. I really, truly appreciate it. It's been an honor.
Oh, well, thank you. It's fun to talk to you. It's good. Makes me think.
Thanks, my friend.
All right.
As promised, John dropped some major knowledge bombs on the tribe today. So, John, again, thank you so much for being on the show. It was an absolute honor speaking to you, my friend. And if you want links to any of his books or some amazing videos that I have in the show notes, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/234. And you could also see John's demo reel so you can get an example of what a demo reel for a director working today in television and feature films looks like, as well as links to his books. And I put a little bonus episode there from YouTube on him sitting down talking about his book On Directing, which is about 30 minutes of just amazing knowledge bombs as well. And if you guys haven't done it yet, head over to screenwritingpodcast.com and please subscribe to my new podcast focusing on the craft and business of screenwriting, the Bulletproof Screenplay. Now, also, I know a lot of you guys have been emailing me and messaging me about Ego and Desire. You guys want to know when the movie's coming out, what's going on with it. I really haven't spoken a whole hell of a lot about it. And there's reasons for all of that, guys. But I have some stuff up my sleeve. And when I have stuff up my sleeve, generally that's good news for you guys. So there's going to be a lot more of Ego and Desire coming up shortly, hopefully in the next few months. A lot more information and a lot more content that I'm going to be creating for you guys so that I can hopefully inspire you to go out and make your own movies. So as always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.